Someone asked me, Dane, what do you think is going on if you step back and look at all this from the view of 30,000 feet? And there's a couple of different things that I see when I look at this, just noticing what I'm doing, noticing the interactions, but as an observer. And the first is that the repressed personas that need to be at the table and have been marginalized culturally are coming forward. The sensitive, the feminine, the wound, diversity, innocence, personas that are deeply and innately part of human potential, of the human wholeness and psyche that our cult has suppressed, shamed, marginalized, etc., are needed for our next steps in human evolution. And they are coming forward, often in tension, meaning there's an inner conflict and a cultural conflict that's leading to some distortion. With feminism, as more and more women have attained the right to compete with men to be more masculine than men are and to be equally validated for their masculinity, has come an awareness that that's not the end of the game. And what this is leading to is a deeper awareness of the underlying chauvinism that values masculine energy in both men and women more than feminine energy in men and women. And we can see this at high with the fact that there's a safe sex conversation, meaning sexuality is an external event and it's an internal event. The external doing of things more the masculine, the internal experiential, the felt experiential domain more of the feminine. And in a school that teaches love and into me you see, you have a safe sex conversation, which is an entirely masculine external event. These are my STDs, this is who I had sex with, this is my doctor's check. And you do not have a single conversation about, there's not a single question on there about the inner world, about the feminine. How does it feel when you're sexually active? What are your emotional patterns? What is your traumatic history? There is no safe emotional conversation. A clear act of embodied chauvinism. As long as you are not physically scarred with an STD, go ahead, whatever. You may feel like shit, you may go through abandonment, you may feel humiliated. We're not going to cover that because that's the inner world. Another thing is personal power and diversity is growing. So, and this is of course part of larger framework, Black Lives Matters, the breaking of the taboo of shame and secrecy with the Me Too movement. We're actually going to talk about women, about abuse, about sexual violation, etc., and chauvinism in this cult. And so there's a growing sense of diversity and personal power. And so this is challenging corrupt power structures or the corrupt nature of our egos, of our families, of our communities, and of our national government. The next thing I think is that trauma is what needs to be addressed for the species to grow, heal, and survive. That we're beginning indirectly with many defenses and a lot of ignorance and a lot of fear and shame. We're going about this we're stumbling into the greatest truth of the species. And the greatest truth of the species says that when you reduce the entire possibility field of the species down to the actuality that is possible, when a noticeable percentage of people are primarily acting out of the reptilian brainstem of fight, flight, and freeze, that you have a phenomena where the lowest common denominator, the one person in 100 with a gun that gets it out and shoots at the ceiling, reduces the entire safety field of the entire group down to the lowest common denominator. If we create, enable, and allow unrepaired trauma in our midst, the species is reduced down to the lowest common denominator of survival-based instincts in the face of trauma that is caused by incompetence, ignorance, emotional illiteracy, and chauvinism, the dishonoring of the feminine state, because it is highly shame-based, highly depressed, lonely, and angry men, meaning men whose feminine side has been so shamed and violated, and so ignored in their feminine side that they are lashing out externally in the domain that is noticed with gun shootings and student shootings and things of this nature. And at some point, it will dawn on us, wow. Not only is the species possibility field being reduced down to the lowest common denominator, not only are trillions of dollars being spent annually in the repercussions of trauma, but trauma in its unresolved state in a traumatically illiterate cult is cutting 60% of the joy and well-being and sanity out of the country, of the species as a whole. And we are perpetuating an education system at high school, in college, in parental protocols of parental illiteracy. We're not going to teach a goddamn thing to our parents. We're just going to, let them traumatize the next generation. We're not spending a single hour as basic education on traumatic repair, symptoms of trauma, what to do, etc., and that this is the single most potent thing that we as a species can address and are not addressing. Pain is a teacher. It tells us we're off course. So pain is on an escalating curve, asking us, do you want to wake up or do you want to destroy yourself? You've got two choices when you're heading in the wrong direction. Another thing is a transition from sexual freedom to sexual responsibility. And what I mean is, it was a really big deal in the 50s and 60s and 70s to go from shame-based, completely ignorant, sexually repressed and abuse culture to freedom and sexual expression. So we had the sexual revolution, and it's all about whatever you want to do is fine. Have sex with your kids watching, watch pornography, take drugs and have sex without a condom, have sex with 20 partners. It's wonderful. And so you have, in any pendulum swing, you have sexual, you have the extreme, in this case, of prudish Victorian sexual repression under the fear of God by the church and the state, and so, an absolute nightmare of repression, ignorance, and stupidity. And then you have the other extreme where, you have groups online saying, well, I'd like, I don't care about you. I don't want to learn about your life. I'd like to have sex, imagining a dead cat for my climax. If you could just call my app and do this, and then get the fuck out of my life. and I'm a free, liberated sexual being because I'm an addict who has no distinction between love and the perversions of childhood trauma that I haven't begun to understand. And I think we're saying enough of that. We don't need another porn site to liberate us. We don't need to have sex with 3 pregnant women without a condom while having an STE to truly claim our power. We actually have to take responsibility. For what? For the impact on the feminine of this degree of proximity and stimulation, and for the bifurcation point, which is that sexuality as a neutral amplification technology either re-traumatizes and reactivates the childhood unconscious abuse contracts and dynamics that have not been dealt with in a shame-based, shadow-averse, trauma-illiterate cult that is passionate to avoid dealing with its own shadow. So it has not been dealt with, so sex as in that abuse state is likely, statistically speaking, to reenact the abuse cycles and bring them to light. So you have choice number 1, just do nothing, have more sex, and re-abuse yourself and other people. Or to take responsibility for the disowned, dishonored feminine in men and in women, to become emotionally illiterate, and to use sexuality as an amplifier in conjunction with a deeper degree of self-honor, with a deeper degree of awareness, after untangling the insanity, after healing the age regression, after addressing the distinctions between what is cruelty and what is love, what is abuse and what is healthy, what is addiction and what is the enjoyment of ourselves as human beings. Now, I believe that any individual and any organization that allies themselves with these trends, that is an active, conscious partner with these trends, will flourish and bring well-being to the species. And that anyone who wants to fight this, why can't we have sex like the good old days without, and just, it just happened, it was meant to be, I rolled over, I stuck it in, oh, it was the best, why can't we just have more promiscuity? Or all the world needs is more touch without any awareness of abuse, etc. That if we can understand, these are the pendulum swings towards symmetry, towards grace, towards integration and intelligence within the species. And so those groups that partner consciously and ethically with those trends will ascend. And those groups that do not will deteriorate, as is essential for change and evolution.